Hi everybody. I got a message through Twitter of a story this person wanted to get out and asked me if I felt it could help to share it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to read the story. I'm not going to give the person's full name. I'm only going to give their first name. Um, it's a story I think many of us have dealt with and gone through. So I'm going to read through the story and I'll give my comments and advice afterwards. So here we go. My name is Michelle, and from the time I was very small, I was physically, sexually, and verbally abused by my mother and sometimes my father. So much makes sense to me now that I have heard your story and memories were triggered for me. My mother is the main narc. For years, my father played the quote-unquote abused husband card very well. He manipulated me into feeling sorry for him as if he was a victim of my crazy mother. I fell for it because he seemed to have empathy sometimes, as most enablers do and flying monkeys do. What I've spoken about is sometimes the enabler and flying monkey is worse than the actual narcissist. He seemed to hear me when I begged him for help, yet he never did anything to help me and fell prey to her baiting him to beat me when he would get home from work. Well, if one adult can get another adult to beat a child, that should be your first red flag. Nobody should be able to be baited to do anything. If your father was beating you, it was because your father wanted to beat you and at the same time look like he's the victim of your mother. They're both equally as bad. Yet he never did anything to help me and fell prey to her baiting him to beat me when he would get home from work. I was always on trial for my life. I was a good soldier, tried my best to please them both, and nothing was good enough, ever. And it never is, and it never will be. Still, I want you to know that I had 20 years of basically no contact when I lived 50 miles away, which was perfect. I was self-sufficient, happy, and accountable for my own success and my own failures. Divorced twice, I never knew how to be in a relationship because my home growing up was constant power struggles between two narcs. Chaos, total chaos, fear, anxiety, and being blamed for every single marital issue they ever had. This is exactly what a lot of us deal with, what I dealt with specifically. When you have two narcissists, one overt, one covert, you don't know which way is up. And the covert one is even worse because they'll act like they're on your side, and the overt narcissist who's openly narcissistic in their behaviors, they usually hide behind their behaviors for their own purposes, and their own to hide their own narcissism and their own agenda. Every fight they got in was because of me getting a bad grade in school, usually a B or C. God, I hear that. And I got worse than B's and C's. But every problem in my parents' relationship was always my fault. When they went to therapy when I was 17, 18, I was told, well, we're in therapy because of you. Come on. Now, even their therapist back then told me that wasn't the truth, that my father and mother just didn't get along. But that's not the narrative they propose to me, or they're your abusers who are in the same position as we are in this situation have heard. It's always our fault, regardless. We are their fallback failsafe of blame. I remember vividly bringing home a C in Catholic school as a freshman and being berated for 4 hours. Told, you will never amount to anything but a hooker on a street corner. And I was told I was going to just be a homeless bum. But you get the picture. I watched my father put his head in his hands and cry because she said that. but never tell me otherwise, never protected me. He follows her like a puppy, then explodes when he can't take it anymore. Well, that's his problem, not yours. Because if he's not strong enough, because he obviously doesn't want anything to do with her either, but he doesn't want to give up that shield of protection of her narcissism, and he doesn't want to give up being able to have you be the brunt of her aggression. And he needs you to take out, because he doesn't take out his aggression on your mother, as the enabler never does. The enabler will always take their aggression out on the narcissist's main victim, mainly you, because it appeases the narcissist, makes his life a lot easier, and it helps him alleviate his own stress, so he doesn't have to face the narc down, and he can go back to being the covert narcissist that he wants to be. When I was 7, my parents adopted my baby brother. He was 3 months old. I guess her mother had suffered many miscarriages and was told she could not get pregnant. 11 months after adopting my little brother came the great miracle child. You guessed it, the golden child, my youngest brother. You know, that's something I hear a lot, that these narcissists love to adopt children. They love to adopt children. It's always under the same premise that I can't get pregnant. And then lo and behold, as soon as they get that adopted child, for some reason within a year, they pop out another child of their own miraculously. See, personally, I think that there was never any issue with these people to have children, or maybe they didn't get as pregnant as fast as they could, but they got their narcissistic supply by adoption because A, it makes you look good. B, is something you can talk about nonstop. Okay, and C, that child and that whole process is a weapon against all their narcissistic targets. Because I guarantee you, if they didn't have the natural brother 11 months later, the adopted child would have been the golden child at that point. My youngest brother, my brothers were much younger than me, so at my young age, I became slave mommy for my mother, which is another thing. You end up raising your parents' children as a child. I grew up way too fast and had way too much responsibility. Another thing that a lot of us take on. It's why we have problems in our adult life, which I have spoken about. We use up all our energy and all our fuel in childhood and early adulthood just to get to that point. And by the time we want to focus on ourselves, we can't motivate ourselves because we have spent up so much energy and so much emotion. And it's like having a sports car with no gas in it. You want it to go, you know it can go fast and perform well. You just don't have the fuel. My greatest regret is after I got married at 19 and left home. My adopted brother became the scapegoated child. Again, once you're out, once the main narcissistic target's out of the house, as I said, they're going to move on and go after that golden child. He took my place. Flash forward to present time. I have not been able to speak with my adopted brother in 6 years due to my parents blackmailing me. Oh, they love blackmail. I miss him terribly and I am brokenhearted over it. He was the only normal one in the family, and we were really best friends. When I was raped at 18, still a good little Catholic girl virgin, he was the one I cried to. I was more afraid of my parents than my rapist. Yeah, let that one sink in. You know, that line strikes me because that is the same thing that happened to my wife in college. And I was just saying, like, did you tell anybody? I'm the only person she's ever told. until she went public with it on her own Facebook a couple of years ago. I'm like, you didn't tell your family though? She's like, no, I would have been blamed. They would have blamed me. They would have said it was something I did, something I was wearing, had something to do with the music. Because you're always, even when you're raped, it's your fault. It's your fault. So that's another typical line and fear of dealing with the narcissist and sexual abuse. I was more afraid of my parents than my rapist. Yeah, let that one sink in. I held that inside. I never told my brother what happened. I would never hurt his mind with that at such a young age. But all he knew was his sissy, I guess that's her sister, was sad and was there to comfort me, or sleep in my room on the floor next to my bed when I was too scared to close my eyes. I hope this is not too much. I've never shared with anyone before, and I am insecure about this. Anyway, the reason I wrote you in the first place is because I cannot go no contact at this time, and I do not know how to handle myself. In 2008, I was laid off my construction job and the market crashed. At that time, I was single, owned my own home since '98, and only had one income. I ended up losing my home to foreclosure and filing bankruptcy. My life was no longer my own. I became desperate, no jobs to be found, sleeping on people's couches, and suddenly my hero parents tell me they just happen to be buying a rental property where I live. Yes, the red flags went off. They can't be trusted. They always hurt me and promise me things to pretend they give a shit. I knew better, but I was so desperate by the time I had a boyfriend. I was so desperate, and by this time I had a boyfriend who would be moving in with me. So to a certain extent, I felt they could not hurt me too badly. Well, there's your mistake. Anytime you take anything from the narcissist, there's going to be strings attached. We've talked about this. And they will always pounce when you are at your lowest. Regardless of what's happened in the past, they will always come in when you are at your lowest and play that loving family that you have so strived for all your life. Maybe this is it, but it isn't. It never is. Because the narcissist is remember, the narcissist is a terminator, which is programmed to get only what they want. They are fooling you. They are using whatever they can to get control of you. And if that means that they're going to buy a rental property and have you live in it just so they can control your life and make you miserable, that's what they're going to do. They do it time and time and time again. We've all dealt with this. We have been here 6 years. In that time, there have been many fights. Even my mother trying to punch me around Christmas one year. Oh, the holiday joy. I mean, can you imagine you are like in your 40s and your mom comes for you like a pit bull? Insanity. Yes, because that's what happens. It ultimately always comes to violence. It usually happens around holidays because that's when the height of attention is up, and that's when you can be really vulnerable as well. You know, I've spoken about on many of my videos about holidays and parties where the narcissism is in full swing. Usually because there's many people there and there's an audience to play to as well. There's a whole group of flying monkey recruiting to be done. Holiday, they are not going to be on their best behavior. And that's when you are going to have fight. And I can't tell you how many of my followers have had physical, verbal altercations at Christmas and holidays with their narcissistic family. Into their 20s, into their 30s, into their 40s, into their 50s, into their 60s. It never ends. Remember, my narc grandmother, Virginia, at 80 years old, took a swing at my Aunt Barbara with a cane. My mother tried to run my grandmother over with a Ford Explorer in her 50s. When my mother was in her 50s, my grandmother was in her 70s, in front of the Little League field on Memorial Day weekend, opening games, Okay, packed crowd. There they are having a fight in the street. A 50-something, a mid 50-year-old and somebody in their mid 70s, mid to late 70s, came to trying to run somebody over in the street. Age is regardless of age. Regardless of age, the violence doesn't stop. In fact, the older they get, the more they think they can get away with. So the violence actually escalates as your narcissist gets older. Because then they start using, well, I'm the mother. I'm 50 years old. I'm 60 years old. I'm 70 years old. I'm now. The entitlement grows with age. They don't get better with age. They get worse with age. Back to the story. Oh, the holiday joy. I mean, you can imagine. You're like in your 40s and your mom comes for you like a pit bull. Insanity. I'm sure you can imagine that, and I have. The constant anxiety has pushed me so close to the dark edge sometimes, not wanting to die, just wanting it to all end. There is a subtle difference there. Absolutely. Absolutely. When we talk about this, a lot of us get deemed as, get labeled as, oh, well, you're suicidal, you're dangerous. No, I just want the bullshit to end. I don't want to die. I just want this over with. Okay? And when you get frustrated and you just say, I want it all to end, you're not talking about, I want to end my life. And there's plenty of you out there who are suicidal, who do struggle with those feelings, but not everybody. And that's another thing. When somebody says, oh, well, you're suicidal, you want to, again, it's like another trigger. No, you're not hearing me. I just want to move on and be done with it. And so I totally understand what she's saying here. Anyway, I'm realizing that it is difficult to tell my story. I am leaving out the horrific parts. My parents recently decided to get a refi on the mortgage. They were going to give us a month to clean up this place because for the last 3 years I have been ill. The last thing about it meeting their impossible OCD standards of living. There's always a standard of living. But usually the standard is for you, not for them. Because if you go look at the way they live, they don't live an OCD lifestyle. Maybe in her case they do, but in my case, you know, everything was always out of place. But I'm a neat freak at this point. I am cleaner than both my parents combined. But you ask them, you know, I'm the biggest slob pig that ever walked the face of the earth. But then you go to their house, it is filthy. It is filthy. There is just stuff out of place, crap all over the place. But they can do it. They can get away with it because they're the adult. The adult, even though I'm 42 and was in my 30s when I broke contact, it never, ever ends because you have to live to a different standard than they do. They were going to give us about a month to clean this place up because the last 3 years I've been ill. The last thing I think about it in meeting their impossible OCD standards where everything is hospital, sanitized, and not a thing is ever out of place. When I found out they were coming, I started to search for help. That's when I found you. The thing about my little brother is that he was originally supposed to move in here with us, but he got into a fight with my parents, and they sent him on a bus ride with a one-way ticket to Arizona where he had lived on the street fighting alcohol and drug addiction. Wow. So there, like when things get real, they'll just send the problem away on a bus? Wow. He got shipped off before they purchased this home. Once they got it, they said he can never know we own that house and let you rent there because he will think we chose you over him. Playing one kid off the other. Unbelievable. And this is what the narcissist does. They play their children off each other. Don't tell them this. Don't tell them that. And I guarantee you, if you talk to your little brother, there's going to be things they said about you that they said don't tell her about because their manipulations never, ever end. never end. This is the blackmail part. So because I am a pussy, afraid to be kicked to the curb, I lost contact with my brother. They, however, speak with him all the time, as does my golden child brother, and who the fuck knows what lies they are telling him about me having no contact. You see how they spun that? She controls all the communication in the family. My father has a phone but cannot use it. Sometimes he sneaks off in the parking lot while she is out compulsively shopping to call me and tell me how miserable he is. But he is a complete spineless enabler